And we're recording. Here we go. Let's see what they have
The
to say about
genre
this.
that for the past few years...
I got it.
Isekai. The genre that for the past few years seems to produce little else than absolute garbage. But it wasn't always like that. Okay, maybe it was, but that's not the point. Hello and welcome, you beautiful people. Before I get started, please do consider subscribing to the channel as I'm trying to reach that magical 1000 this year. It's no big secret that I don't really like Isekai as a genre, but from time to time a diamond emerges from the rough, and that is exactly what Saga of Tanya the Evil is. But why is that? What makes
why?
it so special, and
I
what
thought it was
makes
pretty
a
good.
non-Isekai
Let's
fan
be honest.
enjoy? And I am going to answer that question. Sort of the point of the video, isn't it? But first, I feel it prudent to quickly mention why is it that I don't like most Isekai, and that is actually fairly simple. 99% of modern Isekai is the same mediocre crap: a generic societal outcast who looks like every other Isekai protagonist, dies a generic death and ends up in a most generic fantasy world ever, and would you guess it, they are now overpowered as all hell, and bam, they have a harem. Sometimes there's even a twist. This guy has a smartphone, this guy has his mum, and this guy steals panties. Okay, I admit.
Best one.
Great show,
10 out of 10. I want to be in that one. Let's be in that
Saga
one.
of Tanya the Evil apart from the chaff?
What are we talking
first
about
of all,
this show?
Screw that fantasy setting and good old Truckun as much as we may love it. How about you are about to die, decide to blame God since, you know, might as well, and all of a sudden time stops and would you look at that? A self-proclaimed god whose divinity you challenged partly out of spite and logic and partly cause...
Any man who must say, I am the king, is no true king.
Decides that it would make you a believer as punishment for your insolence, and poof, you end up being reborn smack bang into a suspiciously German-looking nation, declaring world war on everyone else and being declared war on in equal measure. Oh, and you're now an orphan child who soon rises as a cynical as hell lolly witch, committing magical war crimes left, right and centre as a ranking officer of a totally not Third Reich army.
Look, I didn't think she was
Tanya
a bad
von...
guy in the show. Let's be honest here. I really did.
Tanja von der Gurenschaft.
would honestly not be out of place if she stood with Himmler, Göring and the rest. Even if anime, not Germany, is ideologically closer to the Kaiserreich than the third one, since, you know, that might have been a tad too far on the side.
I forgot, there's
Still,
four volume
it's pretty
mixers
obvious that in Saga of
that
Tanya
have to
the
be
Evil,
changed
you are
for it to
rooting
go
for the
up.
bad guy, which presents interesting
Because even though it plays through my
From
headphones,
time
it
to
doesn't
time,
play
Tanya is
through
exactly what you
the
might
stream.
expect from, say, an overzealous SS officer who cares not for anyone's life and has to be reined in by their comrades to not get everyone but herself killed, but that isn't everything she is. At her core, Tanya is still human, and her goal is to land a safe rear echelon job somewhere nice behind a desk shuffling papers back and forth. Too bad she just happens to be really, really good at killing, and as such she gets sent to the front lines time and time again, and eventually that gets to her and she becomes the terrifying and somewhat unhinged officer we all know and love. Not that she was a nice person before the war, but still. And that is kind of a prevailing theme of the anime. Not being evil, but war, and how it gets to people and changes them as they witness and sometimes commit its
I brought
horrors.
this up when I
Now,
was
Tanya the
watching
Evil
it.
is
And
not a
don't
unique
tell me
Isekai
you
having
wouldn't
a
do the
war in
same
it,
thing.
but here
Don't
it's a
lie to me.
prevailing theme, and
You
this
would
isn't
so
a nice
do the
dandy
exact
fantasy
same
war.
thing
No. This
that
is
she did.
mechanized 21st century war on an industrial scale, spiced up with the destructive abilities of mages flying over the battlefield raining down death. And above them all stands Tanya, forced to pray for a god she despises in exchange for power, and what power that is. The magical might exchange for prayer turns Tanya from your average high-capacity mage into
3
a living
years after
form
the
of
Taliban's
divine
return.
punishment. A power she uses to its full extent against all who stand in her way, be they friend or foe. It's no big secret that Tanya is very much the bad guy here, and while there may be some issues with her character,
I don't think she was.
is by no means the only
I
one
think you're
committing
wrong.
atrocities.
I think
but
he's
most of the
wrong.
characters partake in...
I watched the show, and I don't believe she was the bad guy. It's not clearly she's the bad guy, because I don't believe it. If you're telling me you were a major general, you would want to save all the people, you would want to defeat the enemy, and you'd be as ruthless and as vicious as possible. Don't lie to me. Don't lie to me.
in the slaughter are shown to be
I know
good
you would.
people, which really emphasizes the narrative of war makes monsters of us all. Take for example one of Tanya's closest subordinates, Viktoria Ivanovna Serebryakov. As she's introduced, she's a friendly and hopeful, even naive girl with starry eyes, wishing to be a battle mage for the glory that all the stories promised, and then she gets hit with the cold fact that there is no glory in war, just mindless, pointless slaughter, and she too slowly gets pretty damn good at it, never enjoying what she does but not questioning her orders either. Or Anson Sukes, or Sue, whichever you prefer, the dutiful leader of a mage corps serving under the Northern Allied Forces of anime, not Norway and Sweden. He is shown as both a capable soldier fighting to protect his people, as well as a loving father to his daughter Marisu. And yes, the irony of that name in an isekai is not lost on me. And yet, at the end of his line, he is looking pretty much as crazy as Tanya in her worst fits of cruelty. Monsters. Each and every single one. But also so much more. They are soldiers in every meaning of the word. They joke, they mourn, they make friends and build bonds. They are comrades in arms and warriors to the last man and woman, trained to do awful things, either out of necessity or for the sake of someone else's dreams of world dominion. They kill and they die.
That's
But war
exactly
and soldiers isn't all there is to the saga of Tanya the Evil. Religion and questions of divinity and faith
Tower
play an
fantasy.
important part in the story. After all, it was being X, the self-proclaimed god, who brought Tanya here, and it's also him who provides the most devastating of mages with the boost of power necessary for them to do what they do. All for the sake of his own vanity and ego. After all, what is a god?
Hold the phone. I don't believe it was out of vanity and ego that he did that. I watched the show. I still believe that it was to teach her a moral lesson. Okay? The whole thing was supposed to be a moral lesson. And I don't understand why people didn't see what I was trying to see. She was out in this new world, and she was so messed up from the last one that he was trying to teach her, or him, I guess, because, you know, teleportation or whatever. You gonna shut up, Cricket, so I can pay attention? I've killed like 20 of them. But, no, I think she was supposed to learn something.
To a
just refused
non-believer,
to.
and it is this reality that this particular god is so afraid of. What is he and all his power if there is nobody to praise him? And so he pushes humanity into confrontation, either with manipulation or direct action, and as we see, sometimes goes so far as to provide them with the means to make war all the more brutal, since suffering breeds faith. Admittedly, if I had to deal with humanity's bullshit for millennia in countless parallel worlds, I'd be pretty jaded too, and possibly looking for entertainment of a more terrible sort. And since blood sports have been very popular in our history, why would our creator be any different? Then again, arguing with a mortal over belief does also come across a little childish. But I've talked about what is in Tanya the Evil and not if it's actually
I would say
any
that's a good point, though.
Does it look good? Does it sound good? How is the
But look
story?
at the Old Testament.
Well, yes, it is a really,
what God
really
was.
good show. The story is an amalgamation of the aforementioned themes, pulling elements, weapons, and events from World War I with some spice thrown in from World War II, and animifying them into a generally enjoyable, if sometimes grim, package. The story doesn't really hold that many big surprises, but at the same time, it somehow manages to capture the feeling
I don't think it
of
needed to.
life isn't a movie. Bad things happen regardless of how hard you try, and I at least found myself enjoying the brutal reality of the story. The anime also looks good.
It was pretty
isn't an
brutal.
oh my god this is gorgeous effect you might get from, say, certain episodes of Demon Slayer, but there is nothing to really complain about either. Quick editorial note, there is some CGI in the show that doesn't look amazing, but at the same time I have seen far worse in more recent anime.
Sure.
And sometimes, like in the facial expression, Studio Not really hits it out the park. Also, not gonna lie, I enjoyed the glowing eyes of the mages immensely. And same goes for the sound design. It's a bit hit and miss, but mainly on the hit side of things. The music is good, but not really stand out, while the sound effects are an interesting mixture of the bassy and almost mechanical sounds of magic,
He's right. That does sound good,
combined
too.
with all the destructive orchestra of war. Now, it's not like the show contains real sounds of battle, since giving shell shock to your audience would generally be a bad call, but it is more than believable enough. In conclusion, Youjo-senki, Saga of Tanya the Evil, is the perfect isekai for someone who generally dislikes the genre. It throws out the vast majority of the usual isekai tropes, and instead of fantastical adventures, focuses more on social commentary, mainly focused on war and religion. Two things that, let's face it, will always be relevant in our society. It's by no means light viewing, but it is damn good, and amidst all the seriousness and big topics, it's a show about simple things like soldiers, duty, and one prick of a god, and the human who to the very end has chosen to spite the divine. Overall, I'd give Saga of Tanya the Evil a solid 9 out of 10, but that is partially because it's an anime after my own heart, since I do generally enjoy Militaria, but even if you don't, I'd recommend giving the show a chance. It is generally really good, if different from what you might expect from an isekai. And lastly, before I go, leave your thoughts in the comments below. Did you agree or disagree with my verdict? Have you already seen Saga?
Alright, I wouldn't give it a 9 out of 10. Let's be honest here. I would give it a 7. Yeah. I thought it was good, but it wasn't my favorite.